Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the In Full Bloom Book Club. Here we utilize the transformative power of storytelling to explore perspectives and to cultivate empathy, compassion, and connection. Our season theme is collective grief and trauma. Our question and topic for exploration this season is how does trauma shape us? What consequences of collective trauma are we facing today? And how can we support one another in navigating collective grief? We are currently reading Riding the Lightning, A Year in the Life of a New York City Paramedic by Anthony Almojera. Physical and digital book purchase options are in the description box below. You are watching part 2 of us covering chapters 4 through 8. So if you feel like you're missing information, it's probably because you didn't go watch part 1. So go watch part 1 and come back and see us. There are lots of spoilers in these episodes, so if you are interested, go read the chapters and come back to join the discussion. If you enjoy this kind of content and value what we are doing here, you can show your support by liking, commenting, and subscribing below.
Collective rage has been explored in both our narratives so far. The first time in the collective, as we make sense of the women's search for justice, and again in Riding the Lightning, as we discuss the protests following the death of George Floyd. Let's explore the difference in how collective rage is explored in these two novels. Next, let's reflect on how we believe narrative/storytelling impacted our perception of some of the tragedies, e.g. COVID-19, death of George Floyd, BLM protest, riot at the Capitol, that we've witnessed and been impacted by in the past 3 years.
So as far as the differences in how collective rage is explored in the two novels, we are kind of called to, just by way of who the protagonist is in the story, we're called to kind of empathize with different individuals or people, different players in a scenario, or different players in the whole debate about collective rage, right? And so it's so funny because I thought back on the video we did previously, with when we were reading the collective and kind of when we were having that conversation about collective rage and like what purpose does it serve. And I like initially got really like frustrated and like scared about the fact that I had said what I said, because I really made a point to empathize with individuals who were, or I guess to provide an opportunity or a perspective, that would be providing more grace to individuals who may be riding in circumstances. And I think for the most part, I like stand by what I said. And it's not that I couldn't also see um, at the time why someone would, you know, be really angered by watching people vandalize or watching violent outbreaks. I mean, that's devastating. You know what I mean? And so that's, I was not saying that I don't understand that, but I don't know. It's just interesting that I think in part because of the fact that we were, of just the context of what we were talking about, I wonder if I felt so called to like bring that up because of the narrative that we were speaking of, because we were talking about this woman who is enraged and this woman who wanted justice for her, for herself, for her daughter. Um, Whereas this time I felt so compelled to like empathize and honestly almost like denounce that type of behavior. The reality is that like in my personal life, I don't often see the benefit of violence, and I do no harm is like something that I try to practice. And so hearing these stories about um, frontline workers, first responders, cops who were, hit in the head with bricks and things like that, who are out there trying to do their job. Some of them, regardless of what they may have symbolized for individuals, they weren't the individuals that the people were mad at. You know what I mean? Even if they were mad at particular systems in place, right? They're maybe a symbol of that system, but they aren't that system. You know what I mean? These people have families. These people are probably trying to keep people, trying to keep people safe. And anyways, I just thought it was interesting how I felt so compelled to like bring a different perspective this time around, because I can't imagine witnessing that happen in my community. And witnessing my, community feel like it's being torn apart. Um, and I could definitely understand and empathize with people who have a hard time making sense of why someone would do that, or making sense of how people can justify doing that. And like I was talking about last time, people are in crisis and they think that the ends justify the means. But when the thing that's occurring affects another person's community or other people's lives, then it's kind of a different conversation. So anyways, yeah, I think as far as how kind of the stories that we heard, the narratives that we heard through like media, or through like other people, how that impacted how we perceive these events. I mean, I think, media is like they use, persuasion skills. And so they're, pulling on heartstrings, and they're a lot of media outlets have, an angle, so to speak, a perspective, so to speak. And even if the news outlet doesn't have a perspective, the individuals do, right? I think it would be challenging to probably find a news outlet where you're getting completely objective information. And yeah, I think that can definitely impact how we feel about things, and the connections that we have with people, the people that we spend our time around, and who therefore are impacting how the story is told, all impacts us.
Yeah, I think you've kind of touched on something I was saying earlier, like about looking for someone or something to blame. And I think what you kind of just perfectly described is that people confused individuals with the representing like the system or being the system itself. And then that just makes me wonder, like, how could we have like protest a system? Like, how do you protest a system or an institution? Like, it just kind of takes me back to all the frustration that was really in the air. Like, it was, you could cut it with a knife. Like, it was just crazy, like that feeling of like hopelessness and helplessness. Um, and yeah, it was really intense reading about some of the interactions between protesters and first responders. But to answer the initial question about how is collective rage kind of differing between the two novels, I think that in the collective, we are understanding the story from the perspective of a member of the collective. And in Riding the Lightning, Almojera is kind of at the intersection of, um, I think, as he put it in the book, a minority and a first responder. Or it's just really interesting to see how he kind of grapples with those two parts of him. And in terms of the way that how a story is told impacting the way certain events are viewed, I agree with you. It seems like it's there's really no major media outlet where you can just get the facts and like that's it. Like there's not going to be any opinion inserting or like story crafting involved. And I think that has like historically been a way to keep people engaged. Like they feel like they have to like enrage us or like make us have a side to pick in order to make us engage with the story. Like it's kind of like their strategy for proving like why we should care. Like, oh, you should care about this because this group of people or this side of the aisle wants to take away this from you. I think that that ends up doing more harm than good when you kind of have like a covert goal behind the way you're reporting a story.
I definitely agree with both of you. I found it interesting that for the collective, it was we were a part of that rage. We were in it, we were experiencing it. We knew what it felt like, what it looked like. And on this story, it was almost like we were at the receiving end of that rage. Although Anthony and the paramedics, they weren't necessarily the ones that were the problem because they were on that side, because they kind of represented what the issue was, they received, some of that backlash, their trucks being, people like, shaking the trucks and the fires and stuff like that. So I think that's really interesting, the juxtaposition between those two stories when it comes to collective rage. Not planned at all, but I think that's important. And also, I think that goes on to answer the second part of that question as well, is that that's ultimately what influences our perspective of collective rage, is whether we are a part of it or we're receiving that backlash of that rage.
I was just gonna say that, like, I was so excited to dig into this question because our intention is almost an experiment in a sense, because we have this belief that, like, storytelling is transformative. Obviously, that's what we're founded on. And, we're watching this journey that we're all doing together. We're allowing the audience to see that unfold. And, it's just a very genuine reflection that I had, or a genuine response that I had, where I was empathizing with one group last time and then the other group this time. And I was just like, wow, if that's not a testament to the fact that, like, storytelling holds the power to, like, change perspective, or to highlight certain things, or to, impact you in that way, that I don't know what it is. And that just really excited me.
All right, try. We just want to send another reminder. Go ahead and please like the video. Shoot us a comment in the comment section below. Tell us what you think about the questions. Respond to the questions if you like. And then also make sure you subscribe, and also check that notification bell so you know when we're posting more videos.
During the pandemic, people from all over the world shared messages of solidarity. Commercials and hashtags pronouncing "We're in this together," neighbors singing together from their balconies, communities galvanizing to support essential workers and first responders. How did this message of global citizenship impact your experience during the pandemic? What are your reflections on it now, being 3 years removed from the onset of the pandemic?
So, initially, when I read this question, I was thinking about the fact that Anthony had mentioned in the story how, in the news, they were just like kind of glossing over the sacrifices that a lot of the medical emergency responders were making during this time. It kind of, I mean, granted, it wasn't like they were making everything sound like so like great, but like they didn't completely tell the full story. And so, especially like when he mentioned that they had like reels of like the firefighters like driving their trucks, and like everyone waving at the firefighters, and it was like, oh yay, they're doing things. But then Anthony was like, were y'all really though? He kind of had that. So like that came in my head, and I don't know, that was so crazy, because like now I'm just like, I'm thinking about those reels, like those news reels we would see, and just like everyone, having the papers in the window and stuff, and how much of that was genuine and how much of it was just, for a show. I just think specifically because Anthony brought that part up, it made me question how much was genuine, and especially the after fact is that, can we say that that brought us closer together as a country, as a global community? So I just questioned was it just something that just got us through that rough time, which that's not bad. I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing, but is that what it was? It was just this thing for us? It was just a momentary thing where we just needed each other to push through. And then once we kind of got through the other side of it, it was just like, well, forget all that. We're going back to normal. We just kind of forgot what we all kind of experienced together. I don't know. And I just think that's interesting. That's very telling of society in general, how in our darkest times, we definitely need each other. And it showed that we need each other. But at the same time, we crave the status quo. We crave that this certain baseline where this is just what the world is. This is how we've always existed. And are we not comfortable with making the necessary changes to kind of be in that space where we can't always come together. We can always just be in that space where we're together. There's togetherness more often than not. Why does it have to take like a global pandemic to bring us together, you know? So it just brought up thoughts like that. And I will say, I'll speak to during the pandemic when I was seeing things like that, I definitely think it pulled a lot of us out of, or it helped alleviate some of that depressed feelings we felt. Because, like, again, we didn't know which way was up, we didn't know what was going to happen. Um, so I definitely think it was something we needed. We really needed to see those things in order to, get through the really tough moments. But reflecting on it 3 years later, I don't know. I just wonder, what will it take for us to live in that space more often than not, versus without it having to be something that catastrophic.
I definitely think that the kind of like sense of unity across the globe that we had, like, I don't know if this is just me, but I was never really that aware of what was going on in other countries. I just got my passport like maybe like a year ago. Like, I'm not somebody that has a lot of experience traveling. I haven't really had those opportunities. And, I would hear certain stuff on the news, and, they say phrases like, oh, Middle East, and you just vaguely know about certain things. But I think during the pandemic is when I really started to have like a global awareness. For example, like when we think about mask mandates, we would always hear about like, oh, this country still has a mask mandate, or this country just dropped their mask mandate, or this country has a travel ban, like just hearing about certain stuff like that. And as far as like, do I think that's continued like after the onset? I definitely do. Like, I feel like as I'm on the internet, I'm always seeing people from different countries say like, "Oh, why do Americans do this?" or vice versa, or "What is this about?" Like, I feel like it definitely has had a lasting impact, that global citizen messaging that we saw during the pandemic.
Elena, if you don't mind me asking, what year did you graduate high school? 2019? 18?
You're really good at reading lips.
Oh, okay.
2019,
Okay.
I keep forgetting I'm on mute. 2019, so when I started college in 2019, the fall of 2019, we went to spring break. I had my birthday over spring break, and then when it was time to go back, that's when they started sending out the message, like, "Okay, y'all are gonna start coming back to unpack your dorms and, like, get up out of here." Like, that was basically the timeline. So that freshman year of college, we got, like, our regular, fall semester, and then for spring, it was online. And then for my sophomore year, we came back, but we were in masks, and, of course, there was, like, the cleaning and disinfecting, protocols that we had
Oh
for that sophomore year.
my goodness, my heart goes out to you because I can't imagine like the pandemic affected all of our like routines and like how we made sense of our short-term goals and things like that. But like in America, like going to college is such a milestone, you know what I mean? So I can't imagine in my first year of college, like having to be, you know, to redirect my energy like so fast and have kind of this pandemic be the center of my life, especially not at that age. I don't deal with I don't deal with shifts like that well now. I definitely wouldn't have done well at 19, but wow. Um, what's the question for real? First, I'll speak to, I guess, just how I feel like it, yeah, how that impacted my experience. Humans have an incredible ability to adapt, but it does, like Asia kind of was speaking on. Sometimes I imagine that we feel like sometimes we forget like lessons that we're learning, or things that could be beneficial to us. Um, anyways, yeah, I it's hard for me to think like think back then and really be able to speak to how it impacted me. I do know that I was kind of I'm often a little cynical. I was kind of cynical of that was really heartwarming. Like seeing people like come together, that was did my heart so good. And again, like the kind of idea of us like caring about the person across the pond, so to speak, like the person all the way across the world, rather than just worried about our communities and our nation and things like that. Like I'm all for kind of a an appreciation and reverence for like humanity. And so that was really beautiful. Of course, um there was a lot of um there were a lot of like commercials, a lot of different brands that took advantage of this message. Sorry, I'm thinking about one commercial. This was not like the heart of the pandemic, but it was like for like a furniture. It was a furniture commercial, and like they were like, they were saying something like like that we're all in this together type of messaging, and it was just like, how are you relating this to me going out to buy a sofa? And it just seemed like such a stretch. It was just like I had a similar feeling as like how I feel when I feel like people are pandering to certain marginalized communities for the sake of, you know, having people applaud or, having people gravitate toward their brand and, to appear like, they're woke and whatnot. But anyway, so I remember that kind of being a bit frustrating to me. Because yeah, it just didn't seem sensitive to the issues at hand. Um but for the most part, it was really heartwarming to see that. And I was thinking, when I was reading this book, strange enough, again, this is gonna sound crazy, but there was almost kind of a little bit of a mourning for that period to a certain extent where there was so much intentional outpouring of support to one another. Um, and obviously like the detrimental things that happened at the time, the devastating things that happened, I wouldn't want that to happen again. But yeah, that was a very special a special the way we galvanized was really special during that time. But I also remember there being kind of a lot of people talking about the fact that like we're not all in this together. Like y'all, some of you all celebrities for example who are talking like, kind of doing the viral videos about like we're all in this together, people are like, no, you don't understand like our experience, you couldn't possibly understand our experience. And I imagine that the overall sentiment was like we're in support of you all, but I think to some people it felt a little tone deaf. There was a quote from the book, or not a quote from the book. He said, "The poor were more likely to work in jobs where they had contact with the virus, more likely to have health complications that made the virus deadly, more likely to live in a situation where social distancing was impossible." And when I just thought of like all the additional odds stacked against people who were in a lower socioeconomic status, or lower socioeconomic group, I can understand how aggravating it must be to hear people who are living like in a mansion, you know what I mean, who got their people chilling with them, in the other corridor, you know what I mean, saying like, we're all in this together, we all know your experience, you know what I mean, especially when it just feels like, again, like people are trying to garner attention for their own use. Again, kind of what we were talking about, I think when we were talking about the collective, like utilizing people's stories and people's grief and trauma for your own purposes. But what are your reflections on it now being removed from it? I think I already spoke to that. Just kind of like um, the way we came together was really sacred, and I think the reality is that like we as humans have the ability to prioritize. We have the ability to put certain things to the front of our mind and put other things to the back, for the sake of being able to call our attention to things and focus on things and bring our attention to what we feel like is most pertinent at the moment. And the reality is that like at the time it was really leaning on one another in the same way that like lots of people will say things like, I only see my family members when there's a death in the family, right? And we're there, we really lean into that support. at that time, and we prioritize differently when we're not in that level of crisis.
All right, tribe. Thank you so much for joining us. That's all we have for today. Please make sure you stick around for more information about our charities that our community is supporting this season. Also, please join us next episode. We will be going over the last few chapters, so it's June through September. Literally the last 4 chapters of the book. So please join us next time. There's always room for you here. Journey well, everyone.
Hey, Tribe. Before you go, we wanted to chat with you about how you can help your fellow humans navigate collective grief and trauma. This season, each host has chosen a charity to share with you all. The charities we've selected have missions that address collective grief or trauma in some way. Our hope is that you'll find a charity whose mission aligns with your hopes for humanity.
You can check the description box for links to our fundraising pages. We encourage you all to explore the websites for information about each organization's impact and ensure you're making an informed decision when giving. InfoBlue Media has no affiliation with any of these charities or crowdfunding platforms. Thank you all for your consideration.
Journey well.